Liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. We have a pretty full agenda, so I'm going to turn it right over to Mr. Micah, and he can talk about awards, recognitions, and celebrations.
Great. So a couple things just to let you know. I know School Board Appreciation Month was in January, but it's basically still January with how much school we've missed, right? So you've got some gifts from the high school. The VLC actually had cupcakes made for you, so they're right there. If you may, please make sure you take one before you leave. And the elementaries will be gathering their things, but with school out again, it was unfortunately they're not here. We also want to let you know that Tanya Brownfield from the middle school was named Teacher of the Month for February by the students. She was awarded a $50 classroom gift card for her supplies by Chad Orvis of Farmers Insurance. So wanted to recognize Tanya for her great work with kids. She's doing an amazing job at the middle school, and the kids took note of that, so that was pretty neat.
That's great news.
Yeah.
That's it?
That's it.
Good. All right, now we have a consent agenda, including our meeting minutes from the last meeting, our agenda in front of us, the Swartz Creek High School course guides, leadership annual overnight field trip, and the resignations, retirements. I would entertain a motion.
So moved. Support.
Mike, Tony, any comments or questions? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Back to you, Ben, for superintendent report.
So I could have talked about this at the celebrations, but it's been a lot of hard work over the last 4 months as we've been dealing with a lot of behind the scenes for the bond and the financial side of things. Chris has been fantastic in working alongside me in this process, and we have some great partners, RJ and Chris Fry-Marino from Troon Law Firm and PFM respectively. They're going to be talking tonight and doing a brief presentation. It wouldn't be possible without the great group of people that we've had to work with, Stiefel Nicholas and several other partners. Yesterday was what they officially call, or I should say maybe in slang language they call game day, which is where we go out and actually price and sell our bonds. And we were successful, and I'm not going to take a ton away from their presentation because they're going to talk a little bit about that. But all along the way, we've had some really good news. I did send you an email, but just so that everybody's aware, the district received a solid A rating from Standard & Poor's, which is one of the largest national bodies for awarding a credit rating to an organization, and that is very, very spectacular. Credit to a lot of hard work that people have done in this school district. So we're going to hear more about that, but that's something that we've been spending a lot of time on. I want to just draw your attention. I did send an email out to parents today. I'd like to recognize Rich Brownfield and Gene Richards and R.C. Hunt and Bill and Dan Loader, who in the morning at 3, 4 o'clock, they're getting up, they're driving the roads almost every day this time of year. I'm in close contact with them by about 4 a.m., but those guys have already been on the road. They're starting to plow, and the fact that they're out there doing that and giving us up-to-date information makes it very possible for me to have the correct data in which to make an informed decision about closing school. And so I want to thank those hardworking people that are getting up very early to try and keep our kids safe. And so they're the unsung heroes in that. But a lot of people sometimes will wonder, well, what is the process for making a decision on that? There's certainly collaboration amongst other superintendents. We are getting communications from the Road Commission on their recommendations, and we look at a variety of different weather models. And we also have the boots on the ground, the people that I just mentioned who are out driving. So we're thankful for the hard work that they do. This is a copy of the letter that I sent to parents today in case you didn't get it, just so you have an idea of what I sent out, and hopefully we'll explain that process a little better. I also want to transition a little bit to talk about school funding. Chris is going to present a budget tonight. That was also a lot of hard work. We'll talk about that later. But I have a couple things that are going to be more articles for you to consider. And the first one is from the state of Michigan invested. A variety of bipartisan groups got together and they did a research collaborative. It's been the largest school finance research collaborative in the history of school funding in Michigan. And what they did is they basically went around and they tried to figure out what is the true cost to educate a child, and then where does Michigan rank in that. And Michigan has seen a 30% drop in student funding from 2002 to 2015. So as our students that have higher needs that are coming into our schools are on the rise, our school funding has actually dipped and gone down. And so we receive the state base minimum for student funding, just shy of $8,000, $7,800, I believe now. And quite frankly, the Research Collaborative is recommending a base of over well into the 9,000s, and then for students that have special needs or at-risk needs, or they have a variety of other factors that we have to consider when we're educating them, that number grows to 12, 13, and sometimes even higher. Michigan is ranked 50th right now out of 50 states compared to other states in proficiency growth. And then you tie that into how we're near the bottom in funding compared to other states as well. It does have a factor. And so I wanted to arm you just with some research. This is an article from the Research Collaborative. David Arson is one of the key authors of this study. And so I'll pass that around so that you have that. Unfortunately, I don't like to do this. It'll make Chris happy, but there are two articles from Michigan State University. I feel bad about that, but that's just because I'm a Wolverine. But they are very good articles. They are very good articles. And so the first article that goes along with the graphic that I gave you is from David Arson, and he talks about how Michigan schools have had the worst decline in the country in state education funding. That's not a good stat. That's not where you want to rank. The next article I'm going to pass out is really more of a research white paper, also presented by the College of Education from Michigan State University. And again, this article is going to give more of a research background to say, does money actually make an impact on student outcomes? And what you'll find as you read through there is that it in fact does, and they have gotten some really good talking points in that article. The reason I'm giving you these two is that I'd like you to start thinking and considering how we as a district become active and engaged in terms of having conversations with our lawmakers. I meet with the lawmakers that represent this district. I also meet with the lawmakers that represent my community. But it's important that they understand some of this research as well, and it's important that they understand where we rank, for example, in not just the state, but even across the state. And so what I would say the bright news is, the silver lining, is that we are getting it done for kids at a very, very high level at a very, very minimal cost. And so that comes with some sacrifice, but we are proud of what we've been able to do. But I want you to start having these articles so that you can be aware of the state of funding for Michigan schools. And the business community is starting to take note of this. There's a lot of conversation going around the state in terms of talent. And so we want to try and engage that conversation with our lawmakers as much as possible. And I want you to be armed with some research so that you can speak intelligently about that. So I would encourage you to reach out to me, let me know if you have questions or if there's something that strikes you, and I hope we can have some ongoing conversations about how we make our students and the funding that they get for the classroom a top priority. I also, by way of logistics, just want to let you know, March 4th, I have secured a workshop day. So in the morning, the plan will be, and I'll put an agenda together over the weekend, but the idea would be in the morning we would have an opportunity to do some board, superintendent workshop, board relations, those types of things, as we have a new team that we're trying to work together in a group. And then in the afternoon, we will want to try and pick up some of the work we started last year with mission, vision. There's some strategic planning. I'd like us to start looking out 3 years, 5 years. Where do we see the districts? Where do we see the district going? and really establishing some of those vision pieces. And I think you're going to see that really connected to the morning session. So a member from MASB will be out to facilitate all of us in that learning, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to model that all of us need to learn as well, and myself included. So I think it's a great be a great day. So March 4th, I know a lot of you were asking for that on your calendars. I'm going to meet with Tony, hopefully in advance of that, and catch him up and be able to, so he can have a little voice in that conversation. So other than that, I'll let you have those things to ponder, and if you have anything that comes up, as always, email me, call me, and I appreciate it.
Any questions for Ben?
That article that you wrote today, well, I don't know when it was, I read it today, and everybody that responded was extremely positive, and it was just well articulated. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that
my
was a
pleasure.
nice letter,
My pleasure.
very nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I have a question, I don't know if you have the answer. I haven't read this yet, but did the 30% drop, or did they attribute it to reduction in population, revenue, business, and or other? And if it was other, where did it go? Did it go to funding roads or
Yeah, so
other things?
the school aid fund has been a designated pot of money that is supposed to go to K-12 institutions. And what's happened is that they've started to carve millions and millions of dollars out of that fund to fund post-secondary school. The fundamental problem with that, of course, is that the post-secondary institutions continue to raise their tuition rates. We don't have tuition rates, and so they're receiving K-12 money on top of their tuition that they're hiking up, and creating, quite frankly, I mean, to say, and I'm a huge proponent of post-secondary education, but for the money that they're taking out of the K-12 pot, that's problematic. And so the state has to really wrestle with how are they going to utilize the research from the study and think about, all the different competing interests, because there's no doubt that people expect that they're going to deal with roads, they're going to be dealing with this group of Congress people. They are talking heavily about the auto industry and how they're going to deal with auto insurance and no-fault laws. There's a lot of things on their agenda. And so it's going to be interesting. I heard the governor last week. It's going to be interesting to see her first budget proposal, and also what the House and Senate fiscal agencies are going to put out from their side. So we'll be getting that information in March. So by our next board meeting, I hopefully will have an idea of what it looks like for next year as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so moving ahead, we have informational items, nothing critical there. The board subcommittee reports, building insight.
Yep. We met Monday, February 11th at 4 o'clock. We talked about plow truck number 2, 12 years old, lost the transmission. It's not feasible to fix it. We're gonna hold off for a year before we look for replacements. We talked back in the fall about the third shift that was going from November to March. They changed the hours of the third shift. It's now 1 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. So the individual is not working by himself so much and has more opportunity to plow. Before he was ending at 6:30, right when they really needed him. And talked about fixing roof leaks. I think there's currently 10 of them in 3 buildings. And secure bids are going out for the secure entrances. Well, yesterday.
Yeah, they're already up. Yep.
And we adjourned at 5 o'clock. Next meeting is March 11th at 4.
Any questions for Tony? Thank you, Tony. All right, Mike, you wanna go? Finance?
Finance Committee met Monday also at 3 o'clock. We reviewed the budget amendment, which Chris will be covering tonight. She also gave us the following report for our review. 2018-19 General Fund Summary, General Fund Summary Detail, Cash and Investment Summary, Budget Status by level. This shows the budgeted, spent, remaining, and percentages used for each account code. And then definitions of the account codes and the expenditure function codes. which I counted 109 of them, and a sinking fund cash flow sheet. She also reviewed the business office duties, and the committee would like to thank Chris and her staff for her hard, extensive work that's gone into the budget amendment and to the financial reports, and to make them more user-friendly, which she has done. The check register for January was reviewed, and the following was noted. General fund, 152 checks in amount of $530,831. Internal fund, 47 checks, $48,264. Community ed, 2 checks, $486. Cafeteria fund, 4 checks, $89,219.20. As has been stated, and Brian will cover it, the first bond project for the fire alarm replacement has been in, and Brian will talk about that. And the bids on the secure entries are due in on the 28th. There were no public comments, and we began discussions on the DM Burr custodial contract and the closing of Mary Crapo, and that contract expires June 31st of this year. Next meeting is March 11th at 3 p.m. We adjourn at 4.
Any questions for Mike? Thank you, Mike. And thank you, Chris. I'll echo that. You know, you do a lot of the work, and we appreciate it. Ryan, did you have 2 committee reports?
We had the policy committee Monday. We met 7 o'clock in the morning. Rod actually led us, and we walked through it again. We reviewed and discussed all the changes and updates. Also, we had several sticky notes. I don't remember how many, but I think we're going to go over those here a little bit later, and we're going to kind of review those sticky note questions that we had.
Okay.
Other than that, we'll be seeing that here in the next discussion, I think.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Brian? Okay. All right, on Monday, we also had academic achievement, and Rod shared a lot of really good information. There's a newsletter now that's being sent out by Katie Freer for MTSS. Again, Swartz Creek is on the map. They've been contacted by, where was it, Ron?
Oh, somewhere on the East Coast.
Because they're very interested in our program. It's very progressive. So that's to the credit of you and your team. Also, we looked at a variety of documents, but the Hattie information that we looked at a few years ago, which are the influences on student achievement. And I don't know if everybody is receiving this today. Maybe we
I
can
have it
get
electronically,
copies.
I can send
We
it.
can
Yeah, maybe we can get copies to you. It basically assesses different elements by student and curriculum and home and school and teacher, classroom, all different types of components. What has the greatest influence over a child's achievement? And it's really interesting. So maybe we can talk about it at a future meeting too, or share the details of it, Rod, because I think this is really fascinating.
Absolutely.
Additionally, he shared the states ranked by overall poverty, and interestingly, Michigan is number 36 out of 50 at 14+%, which led us to a conversation about what happens when we have snow days and we have children that may not have adequate food at home, and could we do something like the Flint schools have done, open their schools so that the kids could come in and have food, because they may be missing up to 2 meals a day by not being at school. So that was a great suggestion by Mike, and so we had some conversations about that, and Ben was gonna check into that. Let's see, what else? The book study that Rod talked about, the team is going to be looking at a book called Disrupting Poverty, and I look forward to learning more about that and how that can affect a child's achievement and things that educators can do to influence that. So I think that was it. Did I miss anything?
You got it all.
All right. Okay, any questions on that?
Brian had one more.
We had a bond steering committee.
Oh, yes. Yes, go ahead.
At 1,500 hours today, Tony. A lot of information. We had Jim from Gas, Lisa from NJB, Ben, Rod, Travis, and Chris were here, and RC. And from the board, we had Mike and myself. We had an agenda here. Did the board get this agenda? I'm not sure. Okay. I'll see. I'll ask that we
send it
have
out.
this agenda. And also, if we could get the minutes that Travis, if that's okay, from our first bond steering committee was January 16th, and Travis took our notes, which is nice. He took our notes today also. So anyway, we reviewed those minutes, the bond financial update, we've already discussed that, and we'll have further discussion today in just a little bit. The design team report from Lisa from MJB. We've completed, the second bid pack was completed, submitted to state. They did it online and they're waiting for the approval. She had some complications online, but it was the first time they had done it online, MJB. But it sounds like it's gonna go real well that way. So that bid packet we'll be getting in. Well, when we get that approved through the state, we're looking at structures like ceilings, roofing, lighting, windows, and doors. This is the second big bid package. The first one was the fire alarm system that we'll be reviewing tonight. The third bid package will be for siren and gains, and it was kind of a loose discussion in what was going on with that.
So just a couple updates on that. So Cyrene Elementary School, the design of where the parking lot is going to be placed and where that needs to be in relation to the building, it actually makes the most logistical sense to move the office, and it actually saves a little money on square footage by putting it at the end where the entrance will be, where parents and everybody will be coming in. And then we talked a little bit about the Gaines Elementary School entry, which will be actually now on a different side of the building, which would be housed in a classroom, which will, certainly make for an opportunity. There'll have to be a door wall cut out and some things that are done there, but really excited about those plans that we've seen. The goal is to have, August 10th is the date they're targeting to have the Moorish, Elms, and Deke entries complete. And we're hoping to have Gaines, Cyrene Middle School, High School break ground as early as September for the secure entries, so that we can feel very strongly that we've started with the safety and security of the children, which is exactly what we promised to our community. So I didn't mention it in my report, but we have been receiving applications for the Citizens Oversight Committee. We're going to be reaching out to those individuals next week, and we'll be starting to have them start to meet as well and provide us with some feedback. So that'll be helpful as well.
Number 8 was the technology plan. Travis gave us an update. The goals on his technology plan was, number 1 was device purchasing, which will be Chromebooks. Number 2 would be cameras, and we will, our maintenance people will actually do the self-install, but we're using Absolute Security. We've got the pricing on that is through GenEd ISD, and the pricing is basically half the price of what it would be market price. So we're getting a fantastic value or cost on the cameras. And then the third goal for Travis would be the PA systems, and he would like to start bidding those soon. There's no real date put on that, but for the 4 elementary, the cameras. Number 9 was there was some clarity provided through the CM and the architectural, the construction manager and the architects had a certain percentage on their cost and the fees that were going to be delivered. But some of those fees had some things in there that probably shouldn't have been in there. So Ben and I believe the CM and the architects have been going through those and making sure that we're paying for exactly their services and nothing like technology plan. They're not even involved with that, so they should be getting paid a fee for that. So that's being clarified. And Other than that, a lot of information. We had updates on drawings and what have you. March 13th of 2019 will be the next meeting, 3 p.m.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. I do have a question.
Mhm.
Are there other volume purchasing opportunities through the ISD that we can take advantage of in this process?
Yep, so there's a process called REMSI, which is a statewide, and also the county can tap into that and get countywide pricing. So they actually go out and do the bidding. And so when you're talking about a volume of, the tens of thousands of students, you get better pricing than you do for an individual school district. And then the same is true for the state REMSI bid process. So for a lot of technological stuff, for schools, obviously they have driven those costs down, and they've already been competitively priced and bid as well. So we still need to have those documents, which Chris will be gathering, but that is very helpful in terms of, if we were to go with our own system, we wouldn't have the support. We talked a little bit about that, and then there's probably some really good vendors out there that could help us, but one of the benefits of going through GISD is the fact that they service them. They, it's something that we would have support for. So, obviously Travis is pretty sharp, but it's helpful to have other people that know how to, work those. So,
Good.
yeah.
Okay. All right, going on to board discussion items. We have the Neola policy revisions, our final read.
So you've had these policies for a little over, well, for some of you, you've had them for a few months. But I know for some of you that are new, you've had them for a little over a month. The policy committee dissected these. Rod, feel free to jump in, or anybody that was there. I think most of this stack, quite frankly, deals with non-discrimination and anti-harassment, and they're applied to different employee groups. So you've got support staff, you have professional staff, you have administrative staff, and those different groups essentially are going to have the same recommendations across. So that's a large part of this packet. This will be our last time doing this by paper. Obviously, we now have board docs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on March 4th. But there were a couple clarifications we need. Most of the language is dictated by law, or ESSA, which is the federal requirement for schools. And so we need to try our best to kind of just know exactly what the wishes are outside of what is recommended by Neola. So probably the most controversial one that we didn't have 100% resolution on is whether or not we would allow board members to participate remotely, and the board president approves remote participation by a board member. That is optional. I will not provide my recommendation because your job is to do policy, but if you ask me after you deliberate, I'd be happy to get you that, my recommendation. But that's one that I wasn't sure on, so it's right there on 100 in the bylaws, on whether or not we want to have that optional language to allow someone to remotely participate in a board meeting. That would be via conference call, Skype, FaceTime, those types of measures.
For the purpose of voting, right?
Yes.
For the purpose of voting.
Mhm.
And that was, did we clarify whether that constituted quorum or not, if we needed it?
We did not clarify that, but based on the fact that it's in here, would mean that they have already gone and done that background. I can just find out what their response to that would be. But I think at the end of the day, it's philosophical more than anything. Certainly it would be allowable, otherwise it wouldn't be an option. You guys have to decide if you want to allow that as a board.
And we did have a pretty lengthy discussion about this at our policy meeting.
I think
Brian.
the question that came up, we only had 3 board members. I've never seen this happen, but I guess it could. We had 3 more members present physically, and that we would be relying on the 4th member through Skype to have a quorum. Is that legal? I mean, the language talks about voting,
Yep.
but it doesn't talk about a physical presence.
So I'm gonna ask him not to charge me for this, but I'm gonna ask Christopher real quick. If we have quorum, we have to have 4 present board members, or is it your understanding that you could do it remotely?
Sure,
Come up
come
here.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Good evening, all.
Hi.
There's an Attorney General's opinion on this specifically that identifies that a public body may have a member participate remotely, and they would be included as part of the count for quorum. But you as a board have some discretion as to whether you're willing to accept that or not. It's not a mandate, but there is an Attorney General's opinion on that point. I'm forgetting the date of it, though, I apologize.
They would have to stay on the phone for the entire meeting?
Well, they would, because if they disappear, whatever
no
reason,
longer a quorum.
you no longer have a quorum. The other key thing that's important to keep in mind with this concept of remote participation is they have to be participating in some fashion that not only all you board members hear them, but all of the public also has to be able to hear them. Not necessarily see them, but has to be able to hear them. The other thing is, if there are documents that are being passed about at the meeting, you have to consider whether there's going to be a mechanism by which they're gonna have access to those. So, can it be done? Yes. Discretion, though, rests with your board, and as Ben said, that's really in the purview of the board to make that decision.
I'm totally opposed,
I agree with that.
totally opposed. I can't imagine doing that.
Yeah.
That's my position.
Thank you. Thank you. Chris, thank you for clarifying.
My
Appreciate it.
pleasure, my pleasure.
Ben, what page
We'll
is
let
that
you
on
know.
in the old?
Okay.
It's page 6 of 6 under bylaws 0100.
So at our committee meeting, we talked about the likelihood of this happening. And we really came down to, we had 3 people, it was bad weather, or, something happened that would completely prevent another person from being here. It would be at the discretion of the board president to approve their participation, as it's stated here, or our option is to not allow it at all. And then if we had a situation where we had 3 people, we would not have a quorum and we'd have to cancel our meeting. Or nothing would stand on the record,
Probably needed a vote.
yeah. So, I don't know if that helps anybody's, so,
So it doesn't mean that it has to always be, it's an option, but if we don't allow it as an option, then it can never happen. It's a practicality.
Yeah, I like it as a safety net, and I have had those experiences previously and been on the call for an hour when needed, and it's worked out okay. I know that it's possible. I know that there wasn't a communication issue going back and forth, and I also understand it hasn't happened before and it's not likely to happen. It's not a make or break, or like, I'll go either way, obviously, or be okay with it. I'm not steadfast. It must happen.
We've had a split board in the past. We don't have a split board now. I think it's dangerous. I do not want to see it. I think that it's a slippery slope. I think it could be misused, and I just think it's wrong. I'm totally opposed to making a quorum over the phone, and I'm opposed to having them vote over the phone if they're out of state or wherever they're. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's good for any board.
I would agree with Mike, and I also think that Open Meetings Act, there could be some considerations in dealing with that. I know if we do it proper, there shouldn't be a problem, but that's the whole thing. How do we know it's proper, and how do we know we're all looking at the same piece of paper, and on and on. I've never seen it happen in here, or any other place for that matter, but I would be opposed for it. I think it's just too much.
You can't have deliberation and have the same feeling over the phone with a person that you can't have the same feeling that you can have in a boardroom where you're all present and you're all speaking. I don't think it's safe.
And I respect your opinion. I will just play devil's advocate because I spend most of my days on phone calls with people that they're conference calls and you can do them by Skype where you can actually see the folks now, and you can do FaceTime if you had to. But I do appreciate your opinion. So there are mechanisms we would have to have those provisions in place and already set up, which I guess that would involve, having that plan in place if somebody could not make it and they were our quorum. Or even if we have a quorum and the person wants to vote on a particular subject. So, any other discussion before we ask Ben his opinion?
How are you going, if you did it, how would you have assurance that that person on the phone and all the public is hearing everything and seeing everything, seeing the paperwork and hearing all the deliberation and arguing?
So,
How do you do that?
okay, so you'd have to have a speakerphone of some sort, or you'd have to have Skype enabled with voice. So you could either see the person and hear them, or you could see them on FaceTime and hear them. But you'd have to have the ability to project the voice. And to Chris's point, we would have to be able to make sure that the public could hear it. From a document standpoint, jump in, anybody else who has some ideas. A document standpoint, on Skype or WebEx or GoToMeetings, you can share documents and the person could see exactly what we were seeing at the same time. And that would involve some, technology preparation and advanced planning. So,
And then ultimately, it's still under the discretion and approval of the board president. So if the board, if it gets to an issue of one individual or multiple individuals utilizing this option often, it goes back to our president to put a kibosh to it. But it at least opens the option should something come up.
I think the world of Travis, but I don't trust technology like a lot of people here do. I think Mike has kind of a mistrust of that technology also, but that's me.
I've seen it fail more than work.
So in an effort to try and help you move forward, because we have a few more to look at, do you have an informal, it sounds like you somewhat split on it. This isn't an official vote, but could you kind of give, so that when we actually approve as presented, you guys can come to a resolution on that? Can you kind of, so I guess, are you ready to make a determination on, I know Mike's ready to make his determination, but is everybody ready to make a determination?
And I think I heard Tony say that he wasn't.
So we have 3 opposed, 2 for, 4, so 3-4. So Mr. Melke, do you have a recommendation?
No, I had a couple questions, but I was waiting for everybody to be done.
Sure. Go
Do
ahead,
we
Joe.
have the technology that they can do that would be suitable for us here? Has anybody explored that before we either approve, move forward, or backwards?
No.
Okay, we don't have the technology. Well, then with that being said, I like what Alicia and Jessica said. I think it's a great fail-safe program, because I'm always for something as a backup, 2 or 3 backups. So I like the backup plan in case somebody couldn't do something and we needed something voted on right away. That's 1. 2 is that I would be for it if we got the tech support that we could do it and assure it's right. And 3 is I like the program that Madam Chair could either approve it or not approve it, because if it's something critical, we should do it right away. And if it's something that could be put off, she could put it off. So we don't have to use the text, the technology. So I would probably be opposed to it due to what you just said about the tech thing. Because I want the documents, that was my only concern, if that makes sense to people. So that's kind of where I'm coming at with. So I would have said yes if the 3, you answered 2 of my questions in a positive, 1 not.
Sure. Okay.
That's where I stand, because the
I
tech
got
thing's
one more
gotta-
comment.
Yeah, thank you.
If we have a quorum and it's an emergency, we can take care of the matter without a phone call, right? We got a quorum, we can vote.
That's right.
And if it's an emergency, I'm sure we would.
I think they were saying just to fail safe, if there was only 3 people here, and Alicia or me or Brian or Tony were available over the phone, and it was something critical that had to be done, and Ben says, hey, we need to address this right away. On that, I'm sure it's gonna be very,
happen very
Sure.
rare, but if it did, I just like having a backup plan, but if you can't have the tech support to produce documents in the proper voice and the public to be able to hear and make sure everything's very transparent, then I would say no, based on what you told me.
So are we comfortable moving forward that not right now? So we're not gonna check that option right now?
We can always go back to it if we decided we had the technology and that becomes the norm.
Yep.
Okay?
That's for sure.
mean,
I think that's
know-
good, Karen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think I'd be the swing, because it looks like you three were for it, these three were against it, and I just had some questions on it, that's all.
Sure.
Make sure it was done right.
The other options, we've kind of gone over. Most of the policy team has already made some recommendations. I sent it in this document that you got yesterday. The only other one I just needed a little clarification on, well, there's a couple things, but for student body representatives, I'm excited to see us involve our students in the board functions. I'm excited, and I think the students that I meet with at the high school will be excited about this. So the recommendation for 141.1 would be that the student council actually selects a representative. And then I had a little bit of confusion because I guess some of the people on the policy committee wanted that next box checked and others didn't. So I just need to know, are we going to have the box that says they shall be allowed to participate in all board discussions and attend committee meetings to which they may be assigned or invited? The student body representative shall not be allowed to vote or participate in closed sessions. I would just say they cannot participate in closed sessions already, but you can express that explicitly in the policy if you want.
Yeah.
That was, I think the conversation was, make it clear for them and or their parents or anybody else who looks, it says, these are your parameters.
Okay.
We're so happy you're here, but you won't be voting and you won't be going into closed session.
Perfect. 143.1, just the public expression of board members. The optional language there, a board member's personal and private use of social media may have unintended negative consequences to the board member and or the district, including possible violations of the Open Meetings Act and issues relating to creation of a public record. Postings to social media should be done in a manner sensitive to the board member's responsibilities, applicable district policies and legal obligations. We are checking that, correct? That was the policy recommendation,
Yeah.
okay. And I wanted to clarify for all of the non-discrimination, equal opportunity and anti-harassment policies, of which most of those are statute and spelled out. Christy Moore and Rodney Heatherton will be our compliance officers. So they'll be able to hear that, and Rod was very excited about that nomination.
No, I don't think that's what Rod said the day that we had our meeting.
Something about you, but.
Yeah, he tried to pass that
Almost
on.
no scissors.
But the other policies, as you've reviewed, are pretty much given to us. They're either through statute, litigation, or some of the requirements by the ESSA plan. So is there any other discussion that you need to have before? I think I have what I need to be able to update this pack. All right, thank you for all your help on that.
And thanks Rod, for going through it with us.
Yes, thank you, Rod.
Okay. All right, are we ready?
Yeah.
So we have organization resolution and agreement for credit card program.
Okay, so if you look at the document that actually says that right on the top, it's this document right here, it's in your board packet. This does not need to take a very long time. I just want to make you aware of an opportunity. So once we receive our bond proceeds in early March, we will invest those bond proceeds. And the investment broker that we're using is a company called Umbaugh. And hopefully, the investment market will do well, and we'll be able to have a little bit, we'll be able to maximize our dollars to be able to do more projects for children. One of the programs that Umbaugh uses is a purchasing card program. And what it allows for is essentially a 1% rebate on purchases on the card. Chris and I have talked about this. We don't think it's very feasible to pay contractors with or materials and things like that, but it could have some application in technology. And so we're slated to spend about $2.4 million in different district technology. So if you get 1% back on that, that's still a fairly decent chunk of money. So we find that it could be usable or useful to us to do this. This is just the agreement, and if you approve it tonight in action items, we will be using it for that purpose. And so we just need to make sure you're comfortable with that and you don't have any questions.
It gives you the option, but we could go through the whole thing and never even use it.
Correct. There's nothing that's required of us, but if we find that we can use it, we would like to use it on, say, furniture purchases, technology, because then we get rebate to be able to put more money towards the project.
I have a couple questions. Now, how would we spend that money otherwise? Would it be on it with a different card or just writing a check? And is there an interest rate that, because this is a credit card that they charge, do we lose any money potentially, or do we pay the balance off every month?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and there is no fees. There are no fees. Sorry, and this is in fact an optional. We don't have to do it. It's a 1% rebate. You're not gonna pay a contractor with it.
Right.
So if you weren't using this, you would issue a check, and you're gonna be voting on those checks as they come through anyway.
Okay.
So
So it would be paid every month,
yes.
number one, and what's the limit on the credit card?
We haven't established that with them yet. We will probably be talking with them. It's probably about $100,000 by the time you figure, you're gonna be purchasing some large scale technology and things like that.
Who's the caretaker of the credit card?
My name will be on the card.
Any other questions? Okay. All right. Next.
I have one more question.
Okay,
Some
go ahead,
companies charge extra for a credit card. So obviously you'd be not using it if they say, hey, we charge you. I know a lot of businesses, and I have several that, we say, hey, we charge you 2%
Yeah.
if you use a credit card, because that's the whole idea, a lot of businesses are doing that now.
Yeah.
So what's your,
So we wouldn't use it if it was gonna be a net loss for
Okay.
us. But a lot of our vendors that we would use for furniture and things like that, they're on the retail side. They're gonna be they're gonna be dealing with credit card purchases on a pretty regular basis. But if we found a vendor that would take a card but was gonna charge us a percentage, it would make no sense for us to use the card for that particular vendor.
what's our internal policy on how much you can spend at one time on a credit card that we currently have?
So I wouldn't be able to spend, so the way that this would work functionally, you're going to be approving bid packs. So we're gonna bring you, say, we have $200,000 of classroom furniture that we're buying.
Right.
You're going to approve it, you're just gonna see the PO and everything, or it's not gonna be a PO, but an invoice. And then if you approve the purchase, I make the purchase on the card. So there's not gonna be any purchasing on this, likely, unless it's some small amount, but in the bond, there's not many small amounts. So you would approve the purchase, and then if you approved it and we could get the 1% back, we would use it. It's just simply an option.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, bond pricing resolution.
So you had an opportunity to meet Christopher Amarino earlier from Troon Law Firm. Christopher's been fantastic in helping us through this process, and he specializes in school bonds, and he knows most school districts across the state who have gone through bond issues. So we're very fortunate to have his expertise. And we also are especially fortunate to have RJ Naughton, who RJ spoke to you at a previous board meeting. And he's done a ton of legwork behind the scenes, so they both have some information to share with you tonight. And so I'm going to let the two of them take the stage. And Rod, I think they have a presentation to put up there.
I can see why Ben talked about the technology. If we can get the screen working here, and the cameras. I tend to go back on your side. We can get the tech working.
Alright, well, I have a little bit to say before we refer to the presentation.
Okay.
So, thank you, President Jermaine and Superintendent Manka and board members. my pleasure to come back. And we have a lot to go over because it's been very busy since I was last year. We ended up preparing for the bond pricing, which happened yesterday. But before that could happen, we had to put together the preliminary official statement, and that was a joint effort between Ben and Chris and our office and Troon Law Firm. So that preliminary official statement is a marketing document that your underwriter, Stiefel Nicholas, used to find bond holders. So Stiefel, acting as like a broker underwriter, they purchased the bonds and they were lining up bond holders to resell them to. And it's Stiefel Nicholas that's going to provide the bond proceeds to the district on March 5th. So that marketing document was essential to get the process moving, and it took a lot of going back and forth, conference calls and so forth. Then there was a credit rating call, and with Standard & Poor's, and that went really well. But before the call, Standard & Poor's sent out this list of questions to prepare for the call. And it required a lot of preparation, and then there was an hour call between Ben and Chris and the rating analyst in our office. And that call went really well. And the district received an A rating, that's the underlying rating for the bonds, which is a very good rating to have. And that reflects sound management style, strong balance sheet, you have like a 7% fund equity, and some of the decisions that the management has done seemed very positive. And the whole conversation was very upbeat because we were talking about everything going on in your community, and along with what's been done so far with your finances. And you have strong demographics, and that certainly helped too. So I like these meetings, these conference calls with the rating analysts that are just so upbeat and positive, and you just know it's gonna end well. And then about a week later, the analysts called back because they had to go to committee. So the rating analysts met with a whole bunch of other analysts, and they went through all the data, and then they came back with any underlying rating. So that was pretty good. And believe me, that helps the district get a better interest rate on your bonds. Even though your bonds are state qualified and have an overall AA credit rating of the state, the underlying rating does matter. So yesterday was the pricing date, and to prepare for the pricing date, we negotiated interest rates with Stiefel Nicholas. So we have the coupons and we have the yields. And we used other bonds that were brought to the market recently as comparisons. And it took some going back and forth, and we decided on the yields that we were going out with yesterday morning. And then there was a conference call, and we went over the game plan. And then there was actually a game day software, which allowed us to see in real time how many orders were coming in for each maturity and who the buyers were. And it took a little while to get going, but they ended up finding orders for most of the maturities. Then there was a second conference call. And the second conference call got delayed because they were having a little bit of problem. And you know what the problem was? Yesterday, the stock market rallied. And sometimes when that happens, bondholders are selling bonds, like municipal bonds, selling bonds, and buying equities. So, with that respect, the state to sell bonds. But you did find enough buyers, but the Stiefel Nicholas asked to change the yields on some of those maturities, and that's not unusual if they don't find enough buyers for them. In all, the district had a 3.74% interest rate on a 27-year issue. It was fabulous. So I'd like to go over this presentation, but along the way, if you have any questions, feel free. So the voter authorized amount was $48 million. The bonds had coupon that was higher than the going market rate, which meant that the bondholders were paying more than the face value for the bond. They were paying more than the principal amount for the bond. And that excess amount is called premium, and that goes to the district. And that's factored in because the premium less the underwriter's discount plus the principal cannot exceed the voter authorized amount. So that's why the bond principal amount was reduced. And then there's the summary of the use of the proceeds. So you have the principal amount, the net premium, and then you have some of the bond issuance costs, the largest of which is the underwriter's discount, and a lot of that was to compensate their brokers for finding bondholders. And then there was a bunch of other bond issuance costs, like our fee, Troon's fee, and also the fee for printing the official statement, getting the credit rating. The state of Michigan has a fee. So there's a lot of components to bond issuance costs. And then there's the remaining funds are those funds available for the construction project. But during the construction phase, the district's going to earn interest on those funds. So that's basically the sources and uses of funds. Any questions on that? You can get back to it if you think. So what I like to do is compare what we had estimated way back in June when the ballot was prepared at the preliminary qualification meeting. And we like to be fairly conservative with interest rates because that was 8 months ago. And we didn't know the interest rates would stay about the same. So we had estimated interest rates at 4.85, and it came in at 3.74. So 1.1% reduction in the original estimate. But that's basically because interest rates really didn't change much since last June. And the total bond payments at preliminary qualification were just over 88 million, and it came in at just under 76 million, so there's $12 million in lower bond payments. So all very good. And what that meant millage-wise, and by the way, this is based on projected taxable value growth. So the projected millage during the bond term, we had the same millage projection for the first 5 years or so, and then the millage starts to decrease, but it's decreasing at a faster rate than it was at the time of the preliminary qualification meeting. So we were able to amortize more principal in the early years, which saves money on interest, and still have those first 5 years projected at the 3.9 mils. Every year in May, the new taxable value is released, and we like to assist the district with setting the debt levy. So the debt levy could very well be 3.9 this year with the July levy, and in some communities have a December levy. And we won't know that for sure until that taxable value is released in May. And this taxable value growth projection is somewhat conservative, so you may be at 3.9 mils for fewer years. So again, that's contingent on future taxable value growth. But it looks pretty good compared to where we were at the time of the preliminary qualification meeting. So it was a team effort. Steve Nicholas, the underwriter, Troon Law Firm, Mr. Amarino, and Chris and Ben in our office. It's just a fabulous team, and I really had a great time working with everyone.
As did I, and I want to just, this is very exciting news to be able to just kind of also cap what he's saying here and highlight from the initial time that we went out for the bond when we were talking to people about what it was going to be, it's actually going to be less based on what happened here in terms of the millage. Assuming this projection holds, which it likely will, because it's conservative, the millage rates will be dropping faster than anticipated, which is fantastic news for the taxpayers.
So how long are we at 3.9 then? What's the projected for 3.9?
Projected conservatively at 5 years, which is what we called for at the beginning, but then it was going to gradually decline to 3.85. In 2025, we're now projecting a steep drop to down to 3.28, which is going to drop much quicker than anticipated for taxpayers.
And they sold out all $48 million of the bonds.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We took orders for a large percentage of them, and then Stiefel Nicholas purchases the remaining. So our total amount is made whole. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but what did that company purchase them for? I mean, they resell them then obviously for a
Yep.
profit to make more
Yep.
interest on.
Well,
So State Farm is one of them.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're right.
So we had a lot of investment companies, like State Farm Insurance Company bought quite a few bonds. And somewheres I have a list of some of the purchasers.
Can we get a list of that? Is that feasible?
Mhm.
So we can see who purchased them?
Yeah.
And how many were purchased in bulk and then resold? You know,
Well,
that number?
I do have some of this written down, bear with me. Here, it's on the opposite side of my
Yeah.
outline.
Just rough
So,
numbers.
the orders came in from BlackRock, Cumberland, Ameriprise, Goldman Asset Management, Goldman Private Wealth, a little bit of retail, so for some individuals actually purchased your bonds. Baird, in Belleville, and State Farm and PNC Bank. And they underwrote, let me have that. So originally, if Stifel doesn't find buyers for all the bonds, then some of the bonds, they lock in the interest rate and they put the bonds on the shelf to sell later. And that's called underwriting. So that's the risk that Stifel assumes because they don't know when it comes time to selling those bonds whether or not it's gonna be at the same price. And they were going to underwrite initially 3.5 million. But soon after the second conference call, they did find buyers for several of the middle maturities that they didn't have any orders for. And they were only short on the very last two maturities.
How much
So
is that?
if I were to estimate, it was probably the amount remaining as of like yesterday was probably $1.5 million.
Oh, that's all?
Yes.
That's it.
Now, it could very well be that they received orders today. Did you receive an email with an update, Christopher? Sometimes we did.
Well, we got the update yesterday that they had 10% of each maturity, so that's generally where that's what I look for our purposes of documentation. So, I didn't receive any further updates because that would be the final update that I get. But that came in yesterday, shortly after, numbers came out. So, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be saying that, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
But, yeah, so, they have an obligation or a requirement to sell at least 10% to the public at the yield rate that they've identified in the pricing. It's a relatively new requirement under SEC and IRS rules. And so that was the confirmation that I was just describing to RJ a moment ago, that they had hit that 10% of each maturity as of yesterday afternoon, shortly after pricing was finalized.
Do you have any other questions for RJ or?
Well, no, I don't.
Thank you, RJ.
You're welcome. I'd like to
Appreciate
turn
it.
things over to your bond counsel, Christopher Moreno.
Thank you, RJ.
Thank you, RJ, very much. Good evening again, all. RJ has the glamorous side of this because he gets to talk about all the fun numbers. Mine is a little bit more mundane. It's walking you through the resolution. What the board did with its original resolution was to authorize the superintendent to accept pricing on the bonds, provided that it met certain parameters that were identified in your resolution from back in December. And those requirements were that the underwriter's fee wasn't greater than 0.45%, and that the interest rate on your bonds wasn't going to be exceeding 6%. You beat both of those, plus you had the written recommendation from RJ's firm. So that gave your superintendent the authority to accept the pricing. And so what we're doing this evening, and that was just done this morning by execution of what's called a bond purchase agreement. So what we're doing this evening is having the board ratify and affirm that sale. So the resolution that's before the board basically has 3 whereas paragraphs, kind of describes how you got to where you are today. It does reference that resolution from back in December. It does identify that Stifel Nicholas was to be your underwriter, and that the superintendent, based on the recommendation and the satisfaction of the parameters, was considering and accepting pricing. So then we get into the operative paragraphs. Paragraph 1 goes through basically the numbers that RJ just walked you through. Those are all identified here in paragraph 1. We do identify that the bond purchase agreement was signed this morning. We have the purchase price of the bonds identified at the $47,998,076.05, and it also identifies the underwriter's discount and that premium that RJ mentioned earlier. We do identify that the bonds are going to be dated March 5. The dated date is the date you will take down your funds. You'll have money in hand that day. The bonds will mature beginning 2020 and go through 2042 serially each year. Then we also have 2 term bonds. Concept of a term bond is pretty simple. It's just a grouping of bonds for multiple years together into one certificate. Usually done so that large institutional buyers can buy a large block. And you have 2 term bonds. Interest will begin being paid November 1 of this year. Paragraph 3 identifies that the bonds are going to be callable and that the bonds maturing on or after May 1, 2030 are subject to redemption prior to maturity. So if interest rates drop or if the market improves to the degree that you can refund or basically pay off the old bonds with new bonds at a cheaper rate, this gives you that option to do so for the benefit of your taxpayers. Paragraph 4 goes through the detail of those 2 term bonds that I mentioned earlier, and it gives you the structure for those 2. Paragraph 5 identifies what the notice requirements are for early calls on your bonds or early payoff. Paragraph 6 identifies that blank bonds are to be issued. Those are to facilitate secondary market transactions. If a bondholder decides to sell bonds to some other entity, the blank bonds are there to facilitate that transaction. Paragraph 7 identifies that the bonds are going to be registered and maintained. A record will be maintained by your paying agent. In your instance, your paying agent is U.S. Bank National Association out of Detroit. If bonds are lost or stolen, at the top of page 3, it identifies how bondholders can get replacement bonds for that. There's a statutory provision that you'll be following for that purpose. Paragraph 8 identifies how the monies are going to be handled on March 5. So RJ had mentioned earlier the cost of issuance that are to be paid associated with the bond issue, and that's in 8A. Paragraph 8B identifies the money that you will receive for your capital projects account, and that money is what you'll be using to improve your facilities. Paragraph 9 authorizes and approves the issuance of that preliminary official statement that RJ referenced earlier. It's that financial prospectus. Paragraph 10 authorizes a final version of this with all the pricing data to be prepared and circulated. Paragraph 11 does identify U.S. Bank as being your paying agent, and that is the content of the resolution. You will note that there is an exhibit that's attached, Exhibit A. It gives detail on the pricing. It identifies each of the maturities, both serial and term bonds, along with their coupon rates, their premium or discount, and their yield. So that is the resolution that we ask the board to consider this evening. Do ask that it be considered by roll call vote, so that we can be assured that we've got the adequate number of votes on it. It needs to be passed by majority of the board. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those now. If you want to deliberate first and then ask questions, that's fine too.
Any questions for Christopher?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If you'd like to leave, gentlemen, you may.
May I just say thank you so
Yes.
much for all of the work that you did, and it was really exciting to read the report from Standard & Poor's, and so thank you.
Absolutely, but you know, that's really a reflection of your community more than anything else. It's the stewardship of the board and the administration in keeping your district in good financial stead, and it's a reflection of your community at large and the stability of your community. So really, the thanks goes to you all.
Good job.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening.
Thanks, RJ. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, that's exciting, very exciting. It's new to all of us.
Yes, it is.
Okay, 2019 budget revision presentation, Chris.
I do have a slideshow, it's mainly made up of slides that you guys had in your board packet, but since there are some things that were additional, some graphs, I just made some copies for everybody. So I'm pretty excited about the budget revision. I just wanted to get through and make sure everything was good, so I feel better. And the result was good, so I feel like there's, it's a positive thing, So, we focused on the general fund and sinking fund. Those are the areas I felt needed attention ASAP, so, tonight we're presenting general fund and sinking fund. And this is the resolution, the revenue, and then expenditures, and we can go in more detail when we get to the next spreadsheet, and this is the sinking fund. And then the motion. So this is where a lot of the nitty gritty is, and all of the budget information is reflected on the resolution, so it's the same information, so we'll just go through it here because this spreadsheet shows some comparisons. So in the yellow, it's budget to actual. So we're taking the current budget that we're looking for to amend and comparing it to how we did last year. And I think that's a really relevant comparison. It gives us a lot of good information. And then in the blue columns, you can see the original compared to the revised budget that we're proposing tonight. The difference is there. And I wasn't here during the original budget, but I'm doing my best to understand, and sometimes there isn't always an explanation of why the original budget was the way it was. Sometimes we just have to move on from there and know that what we're proposing for the revised is the right place to be at. And of course, as things, it's like ebb and flow. Things come in that we have to increase in the budget, and then we can tweak it here and there, and hopefully in the end we stay pretty close to where we're at. That's what the goal is. So the bottom line for the general fund, revenue to expenditures, we're at 660 to the good. So, do you guys have any questions at this point, or want to look at some of the details, or where do you guys feel like you're at? Do you want me to talk through the revenue piece? What do you want to talk through it a little bit? Okay.
I think that would be helpful, especially for some of our new members and.
Okay, so this is
some
of the main buckets. We have local revenue, so that would be primarily property taxes, but also like ticket sales from the Performing Arts Center and athletic admission gates. Those would be included under that local. Can you see up here? The local line, our revised budget. It is showing that we're going down from the original budget. Property taxes were just estimated higher than where we're going to be at this year, and we have the actual taxable values, so these are right on, these are spot on what we'll expect to collect. The next line is state revenues, and that would be comprised mostly of state aid, money that we get from the state for our pupil funding, which $7,871 per pupil, and a slight increase on that line. Even though we did lose some student FTEs this year, it was offset by some increase in our at-risk funding, so that helped us out. And our at-risk funding went up because our free and reduced went up significantly, just because food service director, he's doing a great job of really collecting those applications for students, and we can reap the benefits on food service side and on the general fund side. So on the federal side, that would be mostly grants. Title I, Title II, IDEA, it went up, and mostly because we had some carryover funds from 17-18 that weren't spent, so the state allowed us to carry those over, and we're utilizing those to their full capacity, so that hopefully this time next year we won't have the same carryover situation. And then the next line, we're not proposing anything right now for sale of assets. We're not sure if there's going to be sale of the buses. Not sure where that discussion's at, so we don't have anything in the budget for that. And incoming transfers, that $75,000 is a transfer of indirect rate that we can take in from the food service. So total revenue, $37,441,450. It's a decrease of $582. So all in all, pretty good. So on the expenditure side, this format mirrors a resolution, and it's broken down pretty much by groupings of function codes. So the first set of groupings is basic instruction, and in your documents, it breaks it down, each grouping even further. So under basic instruction, you have elementary and middle school and high school, preschool. So basic instruction, we're proposing decrease 267,000. I don't really know if anyone, okay? Stop me if you have any questions, otherwise I'll just keep going. The next line, added needs, also decrease, that would be your mostly special ed, in the classroom, your resource room teachers. Adult ed, we have a little bit of grant, for our adult ed, so we're seeing an increase, we had some additional funding this year. Support services for pupils, that would be, in classroom, we have social workers, guidance counselors, we have, speech pathologists, psychologists, those staff members would be under this heading. Support services instruction, we're looking at a decrease in this line. This line was something that I had to manage, so there were a lot of things that I pulled out of there, so that is why we have a decrease. And not that there were any decreases in personnel, just we moved them to more applicable areas. Pupil accounting was in there, we had some HR staff in there, so we put them into the right function code. So what I did was I was like, no, I moved people around. So you shouldn't, in the future you wouldn't see this kind of movement unless there was something big going on. Really nothing big going on here, just moving people into the right buckets. That's what a lot of this is.
Can I just comment, Chris? I actually had this, I don't know if my fellow board members do either, but it was a little alarming to me to see such large numbers getting moved in what I would consider not necessarily appropriate places, but the explanation I got back actually settled my mind, that it was just that there's buckets of money, obviously, in different pots. And when Chris went through it very detailed, identified that certain things were just not coded to the right buckets of money. So there is some movement, but it's just really reappropriating it to the right spot. It's not that we need to shift funds, really. It's just
And
balancing the books a little bit better.
So
Yeah,
if
and the
$190,000 is a negative, it went to one of the other buckets, and do we know, because there's increases of 113, 120, 26 and all these other buckets, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so essentially,
Yeah, I got it, but can we have maybe not an explanation, but
yeah,
Lucky
so,
it's really-
breakdown of how these
yeah.
whole numbers got changed, I guess.
Yeah, so there's two things to consider. Number one, your original budget, as you know from every year, is in a sense throwing a dart at a dartboard. You're giving your best. You're giving your best guess.
Good guess from last year, yeah.
So that's going to happen every year.
Right.
One of the issues that I think is particularly of note in this particular revision is the fact that Chris didn't build the original budget. And as she's given you the information to identify account codes and those types of things, there were just a lot of places where we may have classified things previously into different buckets. And so I would say there's hundreds of examples of where you would see, okay, well, for example, there's a pupil accounting person that's classified in this one. We're pulling them out because the state really needs them to be classified in this one. And so that's going to represent, some of that ebb and flow. But you might be able to shed a little bit of light on some
Are
of
some of those numbers required by the state, or
Yes,
are we
exactly.
individually doing these?
Well, there are function codes that we're required to use per the state. So, for instance, we keep talking about pupil accounting as function code 285. For some reason, probably just because it's always been that way, I hear a lot, well, it's always been like that. And I'm like, well, it's not right, so we're gonna change it, but.
So the person before you may have just put it in the wrong slot, or
let it roll,
Well, how come we didn't catch this before? How come this has been going on like this?
I wasn't here, I have no idea, but under my watch, I was like, no, that's not right.
Because it shouldn't be changing every year. I mean, you guys say
No.
it should be changing every year.
No.
If you have a
No.
number, it should.
Our pupil accountant, she's under 285, before it was 226 or 229, I was like, nope, That's not right. It doesn't make sense. So I like things to make sense so I can talk about it. Otherwise, I'm like, I don't know why it's
How
like
come we
that.
weren't checked on it before you came along?
Maybe different. I'm a very literal person. If it needs to be this way, that's the way it's gonna be, and I'm good with it.
But
you know
you're
what?
following the state
I follow-
guidelines, which are
right.
black and white.
Yeah.
And I'm asking why wasn't it followed before? I know you weren't here. I'm
Yeah,
asking
so
back.
I can give you a little bit of historical backdrop on that, so,
No, we're not.
yeah, so, without naming anyone's names and,
Right.
you know, putting anyone, you know, in a compromising situation, the school districts have different ways of operating their business office. And what I've appreciated about Chris is that she's tried to strip it down and say, this is the way, with her accounting background, this is the way that the accountants and auditors wanna see function codes laid out. There wasn't anything necessarily previously that was done that would have been illegal or wrong, but the way that they were classified, I would say, was a little bit, and I'm gonna use the word loosey-goosey, if you will. So we've got somebody who's classified over here, you know, that kind of makes sense in that category, or they're looking at bigger groupings and putting them in there. And when you have somebody who's got a fine eye to the detail and has an accounting background, Chris has taken those and said, no, we want everything to be attached to the bucket. So a good example would be the practical outworkings. Many of our principals, right, have not had this experience. So their experience has been, well, I just put this code on there and then, you know, things kind of happen, right? And so Chris has basically been trying to help them understand that there's real accounting principles that go on. So when you approve a purchase, you have to know where it's coming out of, what account it's coming out of, and that it's in your budget before you approve it. And so while that had happened in the past, it wasn't as clearly known to even the building level administrator. So she's been working on training them. And so this is really a kind of hitting the reset button, if you will, you know, as we move forward, so that every year now when we move forward, there's a really accurate and systematic way that we move, you know, the budget forward. So I would say this has been a 20-year history in the district that's not necessarily anybody doing anything wrong, but if you were to talk about how to go by the playbook and make it exactly right, this is what you're seeing now. And Mike, I don't know if you can attest to any of that as well.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that, in the past, the administration was known to just roll those numbers when they would do the budget.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I've learned since I've been here.
Sure.
Now, we've been through this, she'll be our third finance director.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to, without naming him, that's what he did. That's what that person did, just rolled the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't come out correct.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't come out near.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why one back, the budgeted amount and the actual amount was so far off on so much of it, like 700,000.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the exact.
Yeah, a
number.
couple years ago, for sure.
Well,
And that,
that's good explanation, so let's
Mhm.
correct it. Let's
Yep.
make sure that if she's gonna do it, I'm assuming the right way,
Yep.
with your guidance,
Yep.
that all our department heads know that,
With your guidance.
Yeah.
or her guidance.
I get to take
I'm
credit
sorry.
for that. No, so
With-
she's
with-
teaching me
With,
most of
with
the
the,
time.
okay,
to be
that,
clear,
that's fine, but this
but
board
yes.
may change, she may change, you may change.
That's right, you're right.
Yeah,
And
we're
we have
hoping
to
to
have
set
the
out the
numbers the
system.
same throughout the system, so there's no
I-
reason for these accounting numbers to be changed from administration to administration, cause either one of you could be gone and the several of us could be gone.
Yeah.
And to make it easily understandable, as I told you before, when we worked at the county and other townships, everything
Mhm.
has a line item and it comes out of a budget number.
Yeah.
So if it's a state guideline, why haven't we been following it? And if we haven't, it sounds like you're trying to correct it, which is very good.
Mm-hmm.
The department heads have to know this.
Mm-hmm.
The board has to know this. So if you guys change, we know some of these numbers, so what they come out of. And it's easier for us to track,
And
because
going forward, so, you
Yeah.
know, next time we revise
that's
it,
all I'm asking, is that
if you
it gets done.
You're
that
right.
way.
Yeah.
Okay.
if you see any changes, you know, we'll be able to say, well, this is exactly why, this is what
Right.
changed, you know,
Right.
and we'll be able to really look at it and use those numbers for analysis.
I
So
get it.
otherwise, if you're putting, you know, budget
Yeah.
numbers that don't mean anything, then you can't really compare your actuals to
But,
anything.
but
Doesn't
somebody's
make
kinda
sense.
made it easy for us, because you said the state has set up guidelines, supposed to be paid out of budget 103.
241.
Okay. How about an assistant principal? 242.
The function code's
Yeah,
the same for
but-
assistant principal.
Okay, or a counselor, or, you know, like you said, the teachers, or the custodial staff, or the contract custodial staff and stuff. It should all be the same, so everybody can easily pick it up as we move on, and say, this number, I get it now, we're spending this much on that. Good,
Yep.
perfect, that's all I wanted to hear.
Yeah, I wanna be very transparent and, you know, just do it the right way.
So Chris, when somebody moves within the district, then their role may change.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Then-
code would change.
Then you would change their code
Yeah,
now,
we have
right?
paperwork
And
that
they would show
HR
up as a
Yep,
change.
Exactly. Yep. So working down the list,
Perfect.
the support, the instructional staff we kinda mentioned, it would be like your instructional coaches, we don't have a lot of, staff in that area anymore, well, the director of special ed would be under this area and his staff, support services, instruction, and then moving down to general administration, that's comprised of the board of ed and executive administration, which would be the superintendent's office. The only change really there was, we decided that as Rod's position, he is assistant superintendent, not curriculum director. We moved him from function code 221, which was the support service instruction, so that's the reason why that went down the 190,000. We put him into a different bucket. So then moving down.
One more question, Chris.
Yeah.
And I know this is general, but like the support services instruction, so that, you've clumped in 4 or 5 bucket numbers into that.
Yep, yep. And, you know. did you-
That's what I'm getting at, so it's just not one bucket number,
Right.
there's maybe 4 of them, like you said,
Right.
you've categorized 4
Yeah.
numbers, you've assigned them to that.
Yep.
That's great, and can we, like, next time, maybe we could have those numbers, or is there
You
too
do.
many numbers
You
to do
do.
that?
It's
Is it on that
broken
other
down.
sheet that you gave us?
Yeah,
Okay.
the packet,
Alright.
did you guys
Yep.
get that in your board packet?
Yeah, that you gave us the other day.
Yep, so,
Perfect.
so you have this summary
Okay.
in there, I didn't include it on this
This-
slideshow,
okay.
but that would be the next level of detail.
Perfect. Thank you.
That ties to this spreadsheet.
Thank you.
Yep, so then we move down to school administration, that would be your principals and your secretaries at the building levels, the administration office. Business services, that would comprise of my office, business services, we have, another weird code, internal services, but that's really what the warehouse is. And then we have another function code that, for making payments, strange payments for odd things, that's other business services, so that kind of comprises business services. Operation maintenance is purely operation maintenance under RC, that's his budget. People transportation is simply people transportation, and the reason it went down so much in this case, we had in the original budget of, line item for, I think it was 2 buses to be purchased, we removed that because we don't need those for this year, so, we reduced the budget by that. Central services is comprised of HR and technology primarily, and people accounting also. So we had a lot of movement in this area. In the original budget, our HR director was not in the budget, so we put half of her FTE in there. What I mentioned, our people accounting person was not in that budget, so that's why you'll see a large amount coming into this area, just rearranging. Once again, athletics was one of the areas I said, oh no, what happened? Cause if you look at the actuals from last year, we were at $656,000, but in the original budget, it only was $325,000 budget, so we needed to correct that. And we didn't just simply say, oh, what did we spend last year? We actually said, okay, had intentional things that we, supplies, staffing, all those costs related to athletics are in there. Community services would be primarily the Performing Arts Center. Other payments would be our transfers, primarily our transfers, and to CDC and community ed. Right now, we have some transfers, and we haven't finished those community ed budget and the CDC budget, so we'll see where we land with that, and if that needs to be modified or not. And so our total expenditures for the general fund, $37,440,790, an increase of $188,000. So we're looking at, as I said before, a surplus of about $660 budgeted. So if that was to stand exact, and we came in at budget 100%, then we would continue having, above 7.5% fund equity. So that's a great position to be in. Hoping to add to it, but we'll see what happens. So these are the graphs that you guys, didn't have in your original board packets. So this is just breaking down the revenue, we're looking at it in those primarily three buckets. Obviously, your state revenue is the largest bucket, comprises 78% of the revenue. Then local revenue or property taxes is about 16% of our revenue, and then federal grants about 5%. Now looking at general fund, if we break it down by function, that's what this graph does. And you can see, which you would expect in a school district, that basic instruction accounts for 50%. I mean, half of our expenditures go to teaching, which, that's a good thing. Then added needs, 10%, special ed. And I was happy to see our admin costs are low. I felt like they were low. Business services, 2%, general admin, 2%, school administration, 7%. I felt pretty good about that. And then breaking the expenditures down a different way would be by object code. So we split them up into salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies, dues and fees. And once again, as expected, salaries and benefits continually is about 80% of the district's budget. Supplies was surprising, only about 5%. I was kind of surprised by that.
We have 1 month of operating then, if something was to go away with that $2 million, not quite that.
I'm sorry?
How much operating do we have with that extra money we have, on a monthly basis? Was that enough to fund the district for 1 month if everything went down?
We
At
carry
2.8?
about, yeah, we carry
You said
about,
7.5%, so that's 3 weeks.
well, we carry about a $2 million, buffer in our checking account, so.
And that would last us for how long?
I wouldn't wanna go much more than a month. We could hold off paying some bills if we needed to, we could just make our necessary payments, our salaries and stuff and benefits.
That's good accounting, 1 month?
Well, it's the best we can do at this point, managing, how much money we have coming in versus going out.
All right, okay, thank you.
So, moving forward, we're gonna continue monitoring general fund and sinking fund budgets. And it's a continuous process. We'll revise them all the way through spring. At the last board meeting, we'll give you a final revision. If something comes up that needs to be revised because it's alarming, then we'll bring it to the board before then. I'll finish revising Community Ed, Child Development Center, and Food Service. And we'll present those at the very latest April, March, if we can wrap up some loose ends. Present those to the Finance Committee, March or April. And then I need to start looking at 1920. Start looking at where we're gonna be. So any other questions?
Mike, I think you had a question, didn't you? You good? Okay. Any other questions for Chris? Thank you, Chris. This is
Thank
amazing.
Thank you for
so
the
much.
presentation.
I really like the summary, Chris, that you did here. That was nice.
Yeah, and as the newbie, I guess this was never this detailed in the past, so I'll say thank you, because I didn't know not to expect it that detailed.
Okay. Moving on, we have the 2018 bond bid pack process and approval structure.
So, essentially, what I wanted you to just be aware of, as we start moving forward, and March will be our first, I should say March will be our second one that you're dealing with significant things. We have a fire alarm issue that had precipitated kind of immediate need. We won't be purchasing anything until we get our bond proceeds, but the fire alarm system at Morrish Elementary School is in dire need of replacement. And so we moved that up and we put a bid package together for the fire alarm system at Deke, Morrish, and Elms. And so that is what you're gonna be approving the recommendation from Wolgas tonight. I want you to just understand in general terms, there's gonna be a couple different things that you're gonna be asked to approve starting in March for the bond. And it's probably gonna be almost every board meeting that you're gonna be seeing contractors, bid packages and things like that. So there's gonna be two primary things. Number one is gonna be what's called a pay book. And Woolgas is gonna provide that, it's really a document for our auditors, it grows to be like 500-600 pages at the end of the bond issue. But what they have is, every single, receipt, expenditure, cent that is spent out in the bond is gonna be allocated in that pay book. There's a summary sheet that you'll see, and so starting at our next board meeting, you're gonna see pay book number 1. And that's gonna be primarily paying for architect fees and a spread out and amortized, I guess, look at our construction manager fees. And so you're gonna be able to start to see that itemized. So that's one aspect of the pay book. The other aspect that you're gonna be asked to look at, like you are tonight, is that we're gonna have bid packages. Woolgas will split those bid packages up depending on how they think they can get the most attractive packages for contractors to bid on. So all of these things are well over the bid threshold. They have to be done in open or in sealed bid format. And so the fire alarm is a great example because it's such a small project comparatively. So they had 6 vendors that went out and had to provide a sealed bid on what they would be willing to install fire alarms. So they get all the specifications and so on and so forth. Can I borrow this for a second? You're going to be receiving a recommendation, and then you'll see all the bids that came in. So you'll see that we had 6 bidders for this particular project, ranging from $278,000 to $145,000. So there's a great variance in terms of the bids that came in. Unless there is some extenuating circumstance, we, of course, being as frugal as we possibly can, are going to want to go with the low bid. However, Woolgas goes out and they have to interview whoever the low bidder is, and they have to make sure that they can actually complete the job. So can they complete the project on time, on schedule? Do they have good references and the capabilities to deliver? And of course, you know, are they do they have some good references in other projects? So Woolgas vets the vendor to make sure that they can do that. And then you have some decisions you can make. You know, if it's within a few $1,000s, you may say, well, we have a local contractor. And I think certainly my recommendation would be, if you have a local contractor, not only is that helping our community and people that support the schools, but it also has a situation where those people are close and they can service the you know, the equipment and things like that. So we will have local contractors that are going to be bidding on various projects. Some of the projects are going to be too big for some of our local people, but they're going to be you're going to be seeing detail of who's bid, and then you'll be able to approve those bid packages as they come through. So that's just kind of what you're going to be seeing starting in March on a pretty regular basis. So as we mentioned earlier, the bid pack 2, which is the secured security entrances for the 3 elementary schools, that bid package is now out there. They're getting some interest in that bid package. And so there's a sealed bid opening and interviews that go on at the end of this month. And so when you go to the board, they're lining it up with our board calendar. So when you get to the board meeting on March 13th, you're going to see a recommendation for awarding the bid to particular contractors and how those come in. So I just want you to be aware of that process, and obviously there's plenty of time to ask questions as we go through, and if you have just anything you need clarified, we will get you the answers.
Any questions? I know you're a very talented gentleman, including being able to sing. And you have managed all of these balls and plates spinning.
Yeah.
Who's helping you do this? Because I know they should be providing you with a project manager, correct?
Yep.
But you can only do this so long.
Sure. So I have to
this
take
is going to be every single month. I anticipate we will have things before us, which is all the more important that we know what's coming and that we're prepared and we have enough people here to vote, so we don't hold you up.
Correct. So a couple answers. Number one, I have to take kind of a 30,000-foot view because I have to be able to see all the projects, but I'm pretty involved with all of the bond conversations. The steering committee will be very vital in being able to make on-the-spot decisions if we have to do that. We're going to have the Citizens Oversight Committee that's going to start up meeting in the next few weeks. We also are going to have, so Chris is very vital in terms of the money in, the money out. Chris also is very vital in her posting of the sealed bid on our Sigma website. So there's different financial pieces in every one of these packages that Chris is responsible for helping, and so she's a vital person in the district who's going to be helping with that. The other piece is that Wolgast, their job is to actually make sure, and I have to be able to oversee that at a certain level, that they're putting these bid packages together. They're the experts. They know, they have the relationships with the contractors. So they're gonna know if we split this into these types of delineations, we'll be able to get competitive. And then of course we have the architects. So I'm scratching the surface on the multitude of people that work on this, but I think it is a very large project. It's not a simple task, and as you even saw through the resolution that you're gonna be asked to approve tonight, and the financial side of things, there's a lot of moving parts. But we're committed to delivering what we promised the taxpayers, and we're committed to being transparent with the money, and you know, we want to do everything right. So it's not worth it to us to not be active with it. So I just want to try and probably over communicate what we're doing with this, because it's a challenge to manage all of it. But it's great because it's exciting for our community, it's exciting for our kids and our staff, and I think people are going to take a lot of pride, as they already do in our school district, but I think they're really going to appreciate what's coming and keeping our kids safe and everything that's going to come from it.
And I know, I just wanna say, we appreciate you doing this, because I know this is a full-time job in itself.
Yep.
So,
Thank you
had
very
enough
much.
conversations with you to know that. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question on this? Did you say this is what, we'll get a report like this every time for a bid with the low bidder? Now, excuse me, you said they do interviews. If there is a concern about that low bidder, will that be in here somewhere?
Yep.
Or
So they will.
did I not look at the other
So
sheets
they're
before?
going to issue a recommendation.
Okay.
And so this is the recommendation that you award to Nectarline, who is the low bidder.
Thanks.
Now, this recommendation would spell out and specify, if they were to say recommend the second bidder,
Mhm.
they would list in detail why they are recommending not the low bidder,
Okay.
okay?
Will there always be one recommendation, or will they ever come forward that, you can really pick between these two, like we don't really have a preference, and then we have to decide?
They probably won't do that,
Okay.
because they know which companies have the track record of being able to deliver, and so they're gonna look, unless it's, you know, within a few dollars or
Right.
something like that, so.
So where's that gonna be at, Ben, where it says the recommendation?
It's on this sheet, it has Wolgast and E&L on the top.
Okay. All right, and will that, and with this sheet here though, I mean, could they just put on there a star rating or something to help us out? Is there such a thing as that, saying that these guys are 4-star rated, these guys are 3-star rated?
I don't know the answer if there's a star rating system, I know that they.
Because like you said, two vendors are within a couple grand apart, but this guy's better and this guy's almost as good, and they're like, shoot, we don't know what to do, we'll give this guy a 4-star and this guy a 3.5 star, and
Yep.
maybe if it's a local vendor, we're like, well, I mean, I don't know
Sure.
if that'll help us or not, if we're gonna be doing these every month.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to look at how the board, 7 of us, can say, hey, look at, these guys got a 4-star rating, this guy got a
Mhm.
5-star, 3-star, and they're saying go with
Mhm.
vendor A,
Yep, so I will ask that question.
if they can.
Yeah, and their recommendation letter on the front will stipulate if, like I said, there's anything there.
And I see
But-
they've already got all disclosures on here, so that's good, that they
Yeah.
put on there. So
And the
we
one
can go
thing,
through
the
that.
one thing that E&L and Wolgast have to guarantee, right, because they're managing these contracts.
Right,
And so they're going to be guaranteeing essentially that the work is done correctly, and that's what they're insured to do. So if something goes wrong, they're on the hook to do that. So they may actually, in their recommendation, say, we've had some concerns and problems in the past with contractor X. and
although he
so-
was the cheapest or the
Correct.
least expensive, good.
Correct.
I think that's what everybody's trying to get to, so we don't get monkeyed up.
I would point out, I don't think you did, in fact, I'm sorry if you did, but the budget for this work was
Yeah.
at 330,000,
Right.
and
Came in
this
at
contract's for
140.
140, that's 183.9, that we can use somewhere else.
Absolutely, and that's a real positive thing. And I think a part of this was the timing of when we went out to bid it. And you can see, I mean, there was a bid in there for $278,000, which was closer to what the budget was. But for, you know, a lot of it's dependent on when the contractor's work schedules are full. And so you might be able to get a bid like we got and save $180-some thousand that we can now apply to other projects that are in the bond. So that's a great point.
And I'm assuming coming down the road, we'll have kind of a check sheet of where are we, you know, this budget piece, we saved $189,000. This one, we're over by 24, and where's our balance and what's left over and kind of what's in that extra bucket.
Yep.
Towards the end.
And I will also be able to provide you some documents, so we also have a kind of a workflow in terms of the tentative project timeline, so when things are being bid, when you know, kind of the order of projects, and we'll be able to help provide that as well.
So in that growing book that you talked about,
Yeah.
all of this will be together for all of the bidders or just those that are successful?
So the pay book is a little different, so you're gonna be approving bid packages, which is this. The pay book is going to be an approval, right? So you're approving a bid, that's a resolution. Then, when it comes time to pay the bills, you have to pay the bills, right? So those are where the bond proceeds, so you might see a pay book and they're gonna have a listing itemized, and they're gonna say, you're gonna pay this contractor $100,000, you're gonna pay this contractor $80,000. You will have already approved the bids and the contractors. But the pay book is the financial side of when now you as a board are authorizing the district and Chris and I to pay these vendors.
So how do we track this? So for example, if there was an issue afterwards about a bidder,
Oh, it's all gonna be,
or if we had an unfortunate experience with somebody.
Yep.
So there's an opportunity down the road. Do we have all that documentation so
Yep,
that if
it's-
anybody wanted to ask the question?
yep.
Okay.
And so I just want you to know, the pay book is going to have every bit of detail, every cent.
Everything.
However, and you're gonna see that each month as it comes through. However, you're doing separate resolutions to approve bidders on different bid packs. And then you're approving the expenditures when we're essentially gonna start issuing checks.
But the bid packs will be available if we ever have an issue down the road.
Absolutely, yep, it's all very documented, and we have to be hypersensitive on top of what we wanna be transparent with everybody. This is going to be highly scrutinized and audited. This will be separately audited from our general fund and other accounts, so we have to keep very close tabs on everything.
You know, just in addition to, from what I understood Jim to say today, cost control manual is what it's called, and he says the boards normally look at the summary sheets because those are already thick. He says the cost control manual is just overwhelming for board members. So he says we would provide the summary, but you've also got the cost control manual, and he says, and at the end of the job, he says an auditor can come in and just walk through that. Every document will be in that cost control manual.
Yep.
Anything else on that?
Nope.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I think now we're down to where the rubber hits the road. Board action items. We have before us a motion to approve the Neola policy revisions that we've reviewed tonight and previous meetings. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support. Mike, Jessica, any comments or questions? Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approve the Neola Policy Revisions, Volume 33, Number 1, as presented. Did I ask if there was any comments or questions? I did.
Yep,
Those in
you did.
favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Moving on, we have the approval of the organization resolution and agreement for credit card program. I need a motion.
So
Support.
Tony, Jessica. Any comments or questions? Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approve the organization resolution and agreement for credit card program as presented. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and we'll need a roll call on this next one. Joanne, please. This is our resolution to ratify acceptance of bond pricing. Need a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Tony, Brian, any comments or questions? Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approve the ratification resolution concerning pricing of the district's bonds as presented by council. Joanne?
Alicia?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
And Brian?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Great. Thank you so much. Next, we have the approval of the 2019 general fund budget revision as presented by Chris. You need a motion?
So
Support.
Support.
Jessica, Brian, any comments or questions? Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approve the 2019 general fund budget revision as presented. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and finally, we have the approval of the 2019 bond bid pack number one. Many
One
to
of.
follow. Fire alarm systems. I need a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Tony, Alicia, we'll give you that one. Any comments or questions? Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek,
I do think you need to use their name.
okay, that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approve the 2019 bond bid packet number one fire alarm system as presented, awarded to Nectarline Electric
Yeah, and the amount.
for $146,100. And any comments or questions? I think I already asked that. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Meinke. Now your work is cut out, right? Okay, now we have public comment. If anybody would like to address the board, please stand and state your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. You can come forward if you'd like. Thank you.
So we're here from Swartz Creek Youth Baseball, so we kinda just have questions just to see how things are gonna go with our upcoming season and the changes. So, for example, construction at Cyrene and Elms, will that interfere with the fields there?
Yeah, so, the Cyrene Elementary School field will, be interrupted when that parking lot goes in. I know we had preliminarily talked about the Moorish Elementary fields and us being able to
Yeah.
help, they're actually, our operations director has actually looked at that.
Yeah.
And, I believe that's a viable option so that we can make sure that we have, since we already have invested in those fields, it's gonna
Right.
cost us a lot less to, get those ready to go.
Right.
So that would be kind of our plan would be so that you're not missing out on a season to be able to, do that. That parking lot, will not really go live until probably the spring of this next school year, cause they're gonna be building and doing construction there. So I think, that's gonna be a conversation that we can just kinda work through.
So we might be okay this season?
It's possible, yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
for both schools?
Yeah, so Elms Road is a tricky one as we look
Yeah.
at that easement, so, I'm not sure yet, but, let's stay in close communication on that, yeah.
Okay. And then, Mary Crapo, all okay for this season as
Yep.
well?
Mhm.
Okay. And then other things that we wanted to do, there is a shed at Elms. We were thinking maybe taking that shed out and putting a larger one in, because we have a, storage rental, which basically, if we got rid of the storage, we would save money by purchasing the shed. So, do we need permission from you guys to do that, or RC to do that?
Yeah, you can email me, kinda what you're thinking in terms of
Yeah.
time or design and where that would go,
Okay.
yeah.
And then, I think that was it. Oh, if we wanted to put in fencing, obviously if we had the funds for that, at Elms, do we contact you for that or RC for that?
It probably would go to, RC first, and then it would end up going to our building and site committee,
Okay.
which we have representation here as well.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
So
I noticed
I'm
you
like
had,
the secretary.
you had a yellow card. Would you
Yeah,
mind putting?
I
your-
didn't know if I needed it or not.
If you can just give it to Joanne, then
Okay.
she doesn't have to bug you for your name, the
Okay.
proper spelling and everything.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Appreciate all your work.
All
Yes,
right.
yep.
Anybody else? No? I can't see who's in the corner, I'm
Lonnie.
sorry. Okay.
Lonnie is over there.
Anybody else? Going, gone? Okay. Next we have comments and questions from the board. Anybody?
I wanna go back to the food. How many people, how many children do we have on assistance? We have a count on that, don't we?
Yeah, so our student free and reduced lunch numbers, I'm not gonna be able to peg this exactly, but I will say it's around 50%.
Oh, that high?
Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
Is it fair to say that those children are eligible for up to 2 meals a day?
I wouldn't wanna misspeak on that,
Okay.
I'm not
I
exactly
didn't know if
sure.
that was global.
They do, it is participation in the breakfast and lunch program.
Okay, so can I get an accurate number on that by next, a fairly accurate number, and then you said that you wanted to increase some of that, so I wanna know what we need to increase and how much money we need, if any, for that.
You're talking about during snow days, for example?
Yeah.
Yeah,
For the
so.
children, this is something that needs to be taken care of, this
Yeah.
is,
Yeah, so the conversation came up, about, during snow days or days where we're off.
Right.
If the food has been delivered, you know, we need to work around those federal guidelines to be able to feed the kids the food, you know, instead of it going to waste. I believe there's a mechanism to do that. We know that there are several schools that have. A couple considerations and just implications are, how do we get the kids here? You know, obviously if it's a snow day, the roads aren't good enough to take transportation here. But I think that we could have a central kitchen that would basically, we'd be able to put out there, hey, if you can get here, we'll be able to feed you.
I'll tell you what, just give us a couple options for the board, so we
Sure.
can discuss that. If we got that high number, I knew it was high, but I didn't realize it was that high.
Yep.
So if it's
For sure.
50% and we have those types of days, we have an obligation to help those children.
I don't know if it's feasible, but we
And
have a
just
very-
give us a couple options, that's all I'm asking, so you give
Yeah.
us option A, B, C, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna
Okay.
discuss it next meeting.
Okay.
And I like the idea of a centralized location, however, I feel like our district is very vast.
It's
and
huge, yeah.
It's wide, that if there are multiple locations, if that's an option, how and where,
Sure.
or roving or whatever it is. But it is a huge need, was the first thing I thought of when we hit a week.
Sure.
That's my concern, that's all I really have on board comments, except I know that when we talked last month, you were talking about the potential of combining schools, you know, 3 through 5 and K through 3, or whatever, it was gonna be 4, 5, K3. And I think at the last meeting Monday, I just asked for some options. So if you wanna pursue that, I think that we should have at least 2 or 3 options, just not hear one option. And I know that your heart was in the right spot, and the financial security of the district, that if money's going down, we have to look at ways to save money. But, and I don't disagree with that option, but I'd like to have 2 or 3 options, so the board can look at it, and members of the community can look at it, it's just one option, that's all,
And
thank
you
you.
do have meetings scheduled coming
Yeah.
up. with
We
the
do,
community
yep,
that
February
they
20th
invited.
is our next week, yep.
Good, that's it, thank you, that's all I have.
When will we get survey results?
Well, we typically would like to go through the public meetings first, so that people can actually hear the information. And then as people process and weigh in, we'll try and be as participatory as we can in those meetings. I would encourage any and all of you to attend any and all of the meetings that you would like to attend. You know, we'll do some report outs, but it'd be helpful, you know, if any of you are there to listen in. And again, this is just an important conversation to have as a community, and I don't think there has to be a decision made right now. We're not forced by any stretch of the imagination to do that, but I do think we need to have a conversation about what does this look like, you know, what does the district look like structurally, long term, and so we'll be presenting some information, some facts, some data, and then we'll be trying to solicit some feedback and generate a healthy conversation. So once that information is shared and discussed, then we'll be encouraging people to continue to complete the survey. There's a number of people who have completed it, but there's also a lot of people that have said, I'm gonna wait until I hear, you know, what the meetings are about.
Mike, you had a question?
I'd like to, say congratulations to Tanya Brownsfield. I know a lot of teachers don't always get the credit for the hard work and the volunteering, the extra work and extra money that they spend, all the time, and that's great that she's a teacher of the month.
It is. Anybody else? Chris, thank you so much for your presentation, and we'll thank Christopher and RJ as well, and Rod for all you do, and for subbing in for Mr. Monker this week on the committees is very helpful. And we do have the need to go into closed session, so I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
What do we do? Just what would you close that session for?
Mike and I
Real
missed
property.
who else. Jessica. We have the need to go into closed session for the
Real
purpose of considering the lease of real property. Open Meetings Act 15.268, Section 8D. We have a motion on the floor. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, I need a roll call, please.
Chuck,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Alicia,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
and Tony.
Yes.
Except
you.
we have a potty break.
Okay, so that motion passes. We will take a
Make sure you
5-minute
don't
break
trip.
and come back.
I think